Following the American victory at Cowpens, General John Morgan moved his army north into North Carolina with British General Charles Cornwallis in pursuit. The reason for pursuing Morgan was to recover British troops captured during the battle and to destroy the American army in the south. In order to accomplish this, he needed light infantry that could travel light and fast enough to catch Morgan's army, but most of those had been lost at Cowpens. So he converted his regular light infantry into light infantry by lighting their baggage, burning most of their food, including his own, and the rum. Now, I probably didn't burn the rum, but anyways, he got rid of the rum. Like in Pirates of the Caribbean, why is the rum always gone? Cornwallis then had the Royal Navy transport food and supplies, and probably rum, to Wilmington, North Carolina, with the only obstacle between his army and resupply being the enemy, which would make his men fight harder. Several rivers lay between the British and their objective, which they would have to cross while pursuing the Americans, who were so kind as to not leave a single boat for them to cross. This would force the British to find fords across the rivers that the men could wade across, which made them vulnerable to American rifle fire that the Americans would take advantage of during the race to the Dan or Roanoke River in Virginia. Pursuing the Americans into North Carolina would lead Cornwallis to the Battle of Guilford Courthouse and finally to the siege of Yorktown. But how did Cornwallis end up in Yorktown in the first place? What were the chain of events that led to his surrender at Yorktown and the end of the American Revolutionary War, a war of independence? I'm glad you asked. So sit back, relax, grab a snack and a drink if you want, get comfortable, and I'll tell you about the road to Yorktown and the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, this time on the History Inquirer. General Nathaniel Greene, after crossing the Dan River into Virginia, rested, resupplied, and acquired reinforcements over a 4-day period before crossing back into North Carolina. General Greene's army will continue to harass the British while keeping the army out of a direct confrontation and preventing the British from receiving Loyalist reinforcements. In one incident, Dr. John Pyle assembled about 400 fellow Black Country Loyalists as mounted infantry and rode off to join Tarleton. Seeing horsemen approaching and assuming they were Tarletons, both wore green jackets, Pyle and his men agreed to let them pass. Only after the two columns had aligned, the newcomers revealed their actual identity: Henry Lee's independent Continental Command, known as the American Legion. By opening fire, the conflict was quickly decided and bloody on one side only, Lee noted. 90 of the Royalists were killed and most of the survivors wounded. After that, few Loyalists joined Tarleton and Cornwallis. With the enlistment period of some of his men about to expire, Greene knew that he had to make a stand against the British Army, which would lead to the Battle of Guilford Courthouse. Greene's army consisted of 4,400 men, including William Washington's and Lyndhurst Henry Lee's cavalry, and outnumbered Cornwallis by a ratio of 2-1. In this battle, Greene would utilize similar tactics to Daniel Morgan at Cowpens by deploying his men in 3 lines. North Carolina militia in front to fire 2 shots before retreating, with cavalry commanded by William Washington and Lyndhurst Henry Lee to attack the flanks. A force of 60 riflemen would take position in front of them as skirmishers to thin the enemy ranks. 400 yards behind the North Carolina militia would be a line of better trained Virginia militia in dense woods. 550 yards behind them would be a third line of battle-hardened professional Continental soldiers from North Carolina, Virginia, and Maryland, deployed on a hill at an angle. setup had a couple issues with it. First, the distances between the lines are much greater than they were at Cowpens. Second, due to the dense woods and the distance, General Greene would be unable to see what was going on in the first line. The battle would commence on March 15th, 1781. Cornwallis' troops had to cross an open field to reach Greene's first stationary line. North Carolina militiamen, setting their muskets and, more commonly, rifles atop a rail fence with a dense forest behind them. Eyewitnesses credited the North Carolinians with significantly degrading Cornwallis' force. Some musketmen in Greene's second line got off as many as 15 shots and entire flints worth. When the British reached the American third line, the battle descended into a melee with William Washington's cavalry joining in. Now, the Marylanders had actually began retreating when this happened. Now, Cornwallis ordered his cannon to fire grape shot into the fray, hitting his own men in the process and killing many, so the rest of the British army could move forward. In the end, despite their first resistance to the British, General Greene ordered a retreat, as he feared if he stayed too long, he would risk losing his army. The British won the battle, though at great cost. The British lost 28% of their men compared to the Americans' 7%. But the British had lost so many men that they could not afford to lose or easily replace, and cost them political and financial support back home. In other words, this was a Pyrrhic victory for the British, and they could not afford another one. Following the battle, General Cornwallis would take his army to Wilmington to rest and resupply, while General Greene would march his men back to South Carolina towards Camden, where they fight the Second Battle of Camden. General Greene and his men would fight the British at Camden again, and they would lose again, but he would save his army to fight another day, and it ended up being another Pyrrhic victory for the British. And actually, the British forces there at Camden had received orders to abandon Camden before this. So the British abandoned Camden after the battle. One thing I love about General Greene is that even though he keeps getting beat time and again, he keeps getting back up and fighting again. In his own words, we fight, we get beat, and we fight again. And this will go on throughout the rest of the war. Is that he wouldn't win a single battle, but he would make the enemy lose so many men that in the end they'd be unable to continue the war. And he would never give up. Now, back in Wilmington, Cornwallis had a decision to make. Follow Greene back south or move into Virginia, where he can pick up reinforcements and potentially establish a foothold to begin taking the other colonies. Thus, on April 25th, 1781, Cornwallis' army left Wilmington for Petersburg, Virginia. They arrived in Petersburg on May 20th and would link up with other British forces under Benedict Arnold. In Virginia, they would go after General Lafayette to attempt to capture the Virginia legislature, including Governor Thomas Jefferson. This would fail. However, Daniel Boone and a few other legislators were detained briefly. Now, Cornwallis' superior, General Henry Clinton, then issued orders that would seal Cornwallis' fate. He ordered Cornwallis to take up a defensible position on the York Peninsula at Yorktown to provide a safe harbor for British ships and await reinforcements. Cornwallis would initially resist this and go to Portsmouth instead, while laying a trap for Lafayette at Green Spring. Nevertheless, in the end, General Cornwallis would move his army to Yorktown, where he would dig in and await reinforcements and supplies that would not come. The French fleet would clash with the British, preventing them from coming to Cornwallis' aid during the Battle of the Chesapeake. General Washington, though keen on pursuing an assault on New York, would be persuaded to bring his army south to besiege Cornwallis at Yorktown. With a combined French and American force of 17,500 men against 7,500 British. This is where I'll pick up the next video. Thank you all for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you all next time on History Inquirer. Thank you.